My name is Patterson, and I am a freelance writer and content creator. Over the past several years, I have written for publications such as Hip Hop DX, CBR, and Pace Magazine. But before actually becoming a professional writer, I spent several years working as a freelance animator. In order to become an animator, I actually studied at SCAD, where I obtained my MFA in animation. Upon receiving that degree, I actually took several jobs in relation to content creation for several individuals, small companies. Many of them wanting, of course, animated content for their websites as well as platforms such as YouTube. During those times, not only was I an animator, I was also a storyboard artist, character, as well as background designer. Really led me onto my current journey as a storyteller was actually years in the making. Ever since I was a kid, I was pretty much had a very active imagination as well as willing to tell stories. Especially when I was younger, a lot of teachers as well as other students would always say, "You're such a good writer," but I never took it seriously because visual art was always my passion. But as I got older, I found, especially as an animator, that I was more invested in the storytelling aspect of everything. So I spent the past few years kind of honing my craft as a storyteller in order to create the content that I wanted to see, not only on film and television, but also on the web. A key moment for me where I made the switch from being just a visual artist into more of a storyteller was actually when I was obtaining my MFA at SCAD. During that time, I actually took a screenwriting class, just to kind of get a feel for it. And I absolutely really fell in love with it. Now, before I had taken some screenwriting classes, but never really got into it all the way. But this one was more comprehensive. We went through creating the entire process, from creating a story Bible to the log line and actually doing a full script. And it was the first time I felt as a writer that this was the path I need to go on. And it kind of changed my trajectory because I had gone back to get my MFA in animation, but then I was switching to writing after realizing maybe I was more of a storyteller. Along with that writing journey, there are two definitely significant moments where I knew I was going the right path, especially when it came to telling stories on the screen. The first one happened literally 2 or 3 years ago, where I was in a writing class that was based on ethics and writing in society. And in that class, I chose to create a short one-act screenplay dealing with Black female artists in the music industry. Of course, I did a lot of research when it came to making the screenplay, because I didn't want to, as a Black male writer, I didn't want to just throw any old thing together. But the moment of truth for me came when we were doing our presentations, kind of activities, and I decided to do table read for the screenplay. In doing the table read, I was able to get kind of immediate reactions to the words that I had created. The story was kind of a little more dramatic. It was somewhat comedic, but it was also very much based in realism. And the reaction that I got from that screenplay was really rewarding to me, because a lot of the women in that class happened to be Black women. And a lot of them were very encouraging and told me they really enjoyed what I wrote and that I should continue on doing with that. So that kind of led me, of course, eventually to that, fleshing out more into my thesis, which also, that thesis led to moment number 2, which is where I actually entered in a contest last year that was funded by creators Issa Rae and Peter Feig, where they were calling for content centered around young people of color, dealing with more of a young adult teenage storyline. So I decided to take the screenplay that I had created as my thesis and actually enter into this contest. Of course, even I admit it may have still been in the rough stages, but I felt it was something I needed to do, just kind of prove something to myself. Well, one thing led to another. I actually ended up getting into like the first round, and it was very exciting because I had just left up a chance. Whatever was meant for me was meant for me, and in that moment was kind of like, okay, I'm going the right path. Like, they really like my treatment. They want to see like the first act and see how it goes. And unfortunately, it didn't work out. But just getting that small little moment where I'm like, okay, I'm going on the right path, really let me know that I was destined to be a writer. This was my calling. This was my purpose. I've always been the type of person who wants to change the world, whether it be through helping others or highlighting certain stories, and this was that big moment for me. And ever since then, I've just been constantly working towards, of course, creating that content highlights the Black experience in America. But of course, along with screenwriting be my biggest specialty, as that's my love and my passion, my other two would have to be fiction and nonfiction. Fiction has been in my life since I was a kid. I grew up being a voracious reader and always loved the art of storytelling, whether it was Boxcar Children's series or Quicker Than Times Square, or reading Catcher in the Rye, or The Invisible Man, or The Eyes of Watching God. Of course, a lot of these were kind of based in real times, but the idea of being able to transport there and not having images, but creating my own ideas or images in my head really fed me as a young person growing up. And that's why fiction tends to be my second love when it comes to writing. Well, really my first, but my close runner-up in terms of that's eventually a lane I want to also explore and go to. Of course, I have some ideas that have been floating around. And then, of course, my second calling, second specialty, which I didn't realize until I actually started taking more writing classes, was creative nonfiction. A lot of my works, especially in my MFA degree, dealt with a lot of nonfiction writing, which I admit wasn't my first love, but I eventually found that I got more response than a lot of the fiction that I was writing, and it was kind of weird to me because I didn't know people wanted to hear my story or hear people that I knew, people that I grew up with or knew their stories, especially when it comes to my growing up in a small southern town. A lot of people seem very interested in all the places and stories that I had to tell about them, which is another thing that I've gotten more comfortable with, telling my truth, whether it's dealing with death or writing a love letter to the place that I grew up in, or dealing with some personal journeys that not only I but my family have gone through, has kind of pushed me to eventually also one day maybe write a memoir based around myself and the people and the place that I grew up in. Hopefully that'll one day be out there. For me, I see my career in the next few years be very prosperous. I want to eventually start my own small studio where I can not only tell the stories that I want to tell, but also tell the stories of others, or at least help others who have been underserved and marginalized to tell their stories. That's one of my biggest goals, is to have that be my crowning achievement, putting content on whether it be television, film, or the web out there for young boys and girls to see themselves on screen. But along with that, I would also, in tangent, want to be able to have my first development deal. I know for a lot of content creators, especially this day and age, the development deal is still one of their goals. Maybe not necessarily getting the content on screen, but at least getting the development deal and getting those stages set to be able to get to a point where your content has been seen by millions of people. Eventually, that's what I want. I'm currently working on a few personal projects that I'm hoping as I continue to grow as a writer and as a creator, they continue to grow with me, which hopefully within the next at least few years, they'll finally be on screen and people will be able to see what I've been going on my head since I was a kid. Another goal of mine is to hopefully have an Emmy. Having grown up watching and loving TV since as far as I can remember, especially watching things like Dari and The Simpsons and Gargoyles and so many other, especially animated shows, I would love to eventually be an Emmy winner. That would be a nice thing to put in front of my name, but I also would love to have an NAACP award as well, just to say I've at least gotten to the point where people recognize and appreciate my work. And of course, another goal of mine, as I mentioned before, is to eventually write my memoir. More focused, of course, on me growing up in a small town, kind of relation to the places that I cherished and adored. That's eventually my another long game plan, is to eventually have that done, hopefully within the next 5 to 10 years. That's a goal. To get that done within the next 5 to 10 years. But also maybe have a film eventually in theaters when we're allowed to go back, and be able to have people see this other thing that I've been wanting to do for a while, which is a project I started in undergrad that I'm kind of looking at retooling and making it cater more to a wider audience, but especially again, speaking on the Black experience, maybe in a more fantastical story, fairy tale type of way. That is all from me, and I hope you not only got to know me as a creative, but as a person. One day, be able to share more of my story with you as time goes on. And I want to say thank you.